Hey, welcome back. I saw that you were very active discussing your answers there. So let's try to check the descriptions. Um, when we I saw that you were very active discussing your answers there. When we did number one, we one of you put number one in formative assessment for learning. At the end, did you decide to put number one there?
But after we think in another way, we put in summative number one.
Number one as summative assessment.
Mm-hmm.
In which category is it? Which question does that answer?
We
When,
think
how,
in
what?
how.
Exactly. Mhm. Exactly. When we test our students, we generally give them tests and they have to answer questions. These tests can be printed, they can be online. At the end of this course, next week, you will do a summative assessment, right?
Mm.
What about number two? I think that one is to understand how much and how well learners are progressing.
We think is formative. It is why.
Okay, does anybody have the other group? Angela, Hugo, Kelly, do you have the same answer? Maria Lisa?
No, actually, we said it was summative, not formative.
We have summative.
And
Now
why?
let's read that one. It says to understand how much and how well learners are progressing. If we are
That is
discussing
formative.
progress, every
Form-
time we are discussing progress, exactly, that's formative. What about number three? It happens at the end of the lesson, the unit, the course, the term.
Summative.
That is summative.
Question?
When.
When?
Absolutely, right? Number four, it is conducted by teachers or peers.
I think formative.
And what question does that answer?
Maybe how?
Definitely. When you send your students homework, for instance, right? They bring their homework and you tell them to exchange assignments. You show them the rubric or the checklist, and they use the checklist as the reference to assess each other's assignment. You are conducting formative assessment. They will give feedback to each other based on the rubric, based on the checklist. Or you can simply collect the assignments, assess, and return the homework with your comments. So you are conducting formative assessment. Because the idea is that the feedback you are giving your students will help them improve what they are learning. Excellent. What about number five?
It's summative and why?
Absolutely right. That's generally the one we use to decide whether a student passes or fails a course. If we get a band 3, a band 2, that's the reason why we conduct summative assessment. Number 6.
Formative.
And what question does that answer?
I'm not sure, but we think when.
Mm-hmm.
When, yes, we have the same.
Can you think of or elaborate on your answer? Why is it when, and how do you see formative assessment happening in that way, ongoing, continuous through the academic year?
Because this repeatedly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It happens all the time. Not only is it homework, when your students make a presentation, when they are designing models, when they complete a worksheet, uh, every time you send them problems to solve, like in mathematics, or experiments to make in science, you are assessing. When you start a lesson and you start with a mini quiz, you are assessing. But the key there is that this assessment is continuous. It's happening at all times through the academic year. What about number 7? Julio, what do you have there?
Okay, number 7, I have formative assessment.
And what category is that?
Uh, this might be an example of it.
Have you used portfolios with your students or portfolio assessment?
Yes, sort of.
Can you explain to us how you use it?
Well, obviously, uh, all the themes, all the materials that we have been using throughout the, the academic year,
Mhm,
um, uh, we can also just uh, gather some information related to formative assessment,
mhm,
a variety of activities which involves the student's performance,
mhm.
whether it could be in speaking or writing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so you collect different types of different samples of activities,
Yep.
right? Okay, and do the students have any criteria to collect that material?
Um,
Or do you give them any criteria to do that? Or they collect the materials through the academic year for revision later?
yes, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, okay. What are other ways of conducting portfolio assessment?
Maybe a rubric in my case. When in this week I begin a new position like an art teacher.
Mhm.
I think it's really important to elaborate the rubric because the students need to to understand what's my criteria for the qualification, I
Mhm.
think.
Mhm. That's a good thing when students have a rubric and they start collecting their written work. Uh, this process of self-reflection helps a lot because they use the rubric to check their own writing, reflect what went well, what went wrong, and then little by little, as the time goes and they start collecting the same type of assessment in their portfolios, they can see their progress and their own reflection. Oh, when I started writing reports, I didn't have an idea how to organize the report. 10 assignments later, the student notices that he is more aware of the organization, that he understands the type of language that he or she needs to use. And at that moment in the academic year, that student is probably working in aspects like um, the vocabulary, trying to use more subject-specific vocabulary in the reports. But the student is aware of the progress he or she has made and the areas that they are still working. So using a rubric in the portfolio as the criteria for assessment is a good idea. When you have different samples, as Julio mentioned, it is important the organization, right? One section of my portfolio might be for reading assignments, uh, writing, so the student knows how to find the information. But what's more important is what we do with the portfolio. Apart from collecting work, it should be an instrument for assessment, self-assessment, peer assessment, reflection, feedback. What about the next one? Number 8. To find out what learners know at a specific time.
We have as a summative and we have why, because it says at a specific time.
Absolutely. Number 9.
Number 9, that is summative, and that is how.
And I have a question there because external assessors are mentioned. Uh, when do external assessors conduct this type of assessment?
Cambridge
Maybe
certificate.
In
in some
Cambridge.
situations. Mhm.
Exactly. Very well done. So there isn't a way to know what's going to happen in the assessment. Okay. And that's a bit different from the exams taken at the school because of especially because of the washback effect. Are you familiar with this term, the washback? Other people also say backwash, but you can use one or the other.
No, what is that?
Washback refers to that the result of assessment is that sometimes teachers tend to prepare learners for the exam only. See? So if I know what the content of the test is, I spend time preparing the learners for that specific test. As a result, the scores are high, but that doesn't necessarily mean there was learning. What there was is training for the exam. That is one of the characteristics of backwash. Another characteristic of backwash is that learning effect that produces in the learner. For example, when a student, or the other day, my students did a reading on Inti Raimi. They were doing a test and they didn't know about Inti Raimi. They completed their test, and after the test, they came really excited and they wanted to know more about this festivity. So backwash also produces that learning effect in the student, that the test itself is an instrument for learning. And probably if you took a Cambridge exam in the past, you will probably remember when you were doing the listening section or the reading section and you found an interesting reading in the exam and you said, oh, I didn't know this. It was really interesting. I enjoyed the test because I also learned something. So that is another characteristic of the washback effect. See, first, that tendency of the teacher to prepare their students for the test, but that doesn't guarantee learning. That is why some institutions prefer or they choose external assessment to measure proficiency, like in the case of Cambridge exams. What about other external exams? Are you familiar with any? Or your institutions maybe are there external assessment? Have you heard of the PISA tests? The PISA test is an international external assessment that is given to students who are exactly 15 years old. So they do subjects like math, science, if I'm not wrong. I don't remember exactly the content of the exam, but the students from around the world can take that exam to decide the level of learning in specific areas. If I am not wrong, the government gives external assessment to students at the end, ser bachiller. Do you remember that exam?
Yes, also in primary, some students are tested when they are in 10th grade, I think.
What test do they take?
I'm not sure, but I know that they are tested in the basic subjects like math, geography, but I'm not really sure. I think when they are in 10th grade or something.
Exactly. So those are examples of external assessment where external examiners conduct the process. What about number 10? To find out the strengths and weaknesses.
Number 10, we have formative and why.
The why is fine, but that's more summative.
The end.
Remember that one key difference is that you use the information from the assessment to take action towards improvement. See, when it is summative, you just need to identify these are the strengths, these are the weaknesses, and that information will be given to the next teacher next year.
Okay.
Right? See, so you just identify strengths and weaknesses at the end, that's summative. When the focus is on improvement, then we're talking about formative. This is the problem. The student doesn't know how to find or how to use Venn diagrams to compare and contrast and can find similarities and differences between metals and non-metals. So that's an area of improvement that makes it formative. And that's something more specific. Whereas in summative, you have information from different areas of knowledge, and that makes it summative. What about the next one?
Diagnostic test is formative. And it's some.
Kelly, once again, that we are in number 11, right? Diagnostic
Yes,
test.
11 diagnostic tests is formative and example.
It is an example, definitely. But when do we take diagnostic tests?
At the very beginning.
To do what?
In order to know maybe the subjects that is missing, maybe, or the knowledge in order to part.
Okay, you mentioned something key, knowledge. When we conduct diagnostic tests at the beginning of the year, what do we want to know about knowledge? Angela? Maria Elisa?
How much knows
How
about
much they know and what they don't know. In other words, we want to know strengths and weaknesses. So that is an example of
Summative.
perfect. Notice that the diagnostic test doesn't happen at the end of the course, but the purpose is to identify strengths and weaknesses because we haven't started teaching yet, right? What we measure is what the student knows until last year, the previous year. That is why that one is an example of summative assessment or assessment of learning. Number 12, it happens by observation, observing task performance, presentations.
We put in formative and in how.
Because
Because we can see the evidence in the presentation of if they are achieving different skills or improving different skills.
absolutely. So remember, the word performance is always connected to how. How does the student do it? How does the student write? How does the student establish similarities and differences? How does the student make a presentation? So when you assess performance, what you're basically focus is on improvement, how to help the student reinforce weaker areas. It is not to give them a final score. And that sometimes, well, I'm happy to know that in our country, that has changed a lot. But I remember that many years ago, if a student just made a bad presentation, the teachers were used to be very judgmental, right? So the student failed. I failed the presentation. I will fail the course. When a presentation is part of performance, how you do something. What about the next one, number 13? To give feedback on learning.
The same, formative and why.
Number 12 was how.
How?
How you measure performance, how the student does something.
Why?
Why is number 13? But
Yeah,
remember,
that is 13.
as I said before, the word performance is related to how. How does the student do something? That's why number 12 is how. On the other hand, number 13 is why, because that is the purpose of the assessment. Why do I need to, why do my students make presentations? Right? I want to give them feedback. I want to tell them if they, they have mastered the content or if they still need to work on their language. This week, I had a very interesting conversation with the math teacher here because the students are learning rotations. So the teacher is showing them triangles, quadrilaterals, different shapes in the grid, the coordinates grid. The students know the content. They can draw how the shapes look after certain rotations. The problem is when the students go to the board, the teacher asks them to draw the resulting quadrilateral after a rotation. They do it, but the moment they have to explain it, they start saying things like, because these go here and then looks like this. So that use of vague language shows that the student assimilated the content, but they do not have the language to explain the process of how they are doing it. So the purpose of making those presentations, is not even a presentation. Class participation on the board is formative assessment, because I want to identify what aspect of the 4 Cs is a weaker area. In the case of certain students who knew how to draw the new shapes, the problem was communication. They didn't know how to communicate the process. So the discussion with the teacher was, okay, so now your job is to provide those students with sentence frames. Make them notice cohesive devices. Maybe you can use artificial intelligence to generate an audio where a teacher is explaining the process, how the triangle rotates, and the students will listen and complete the explanation with the cohesive devices first, second, or the subject-specific vocabulary. See, so in that way, the teacher is developing the skill of making presentations, explaining a process, and at the same time, reinforcing and exposing the learners to subject-specific vocabulary for that topic. The purpose is not to give them, yes, you're a good student, or no, you're a bad student. Does that make sense, guys? What about the next one? Number 14, by looking for evidence of learning.
We have formative and how.
Number
Because we
15.
as a teachers, we are doing all the time.
Absolutely, right? As much as we try to spot areas, weaker areas, we also need to find evidence of learning to give them feedback. Number 15. Performance assessment.
Formative examples.
Absolutely. Number 16.
We have formative and why.
17.
Summative and examples.
Good.
Yeah.
And the last one, 18.
Formative and why.
Absolutely. Very well done. Now, let me just share my screen really quickly here. Oh, what did I do? So just to summarize what you just did, remember that when we talk about assessment of learning, what we want to do is to improve learning while it is ongoing. That means that we need to identify areas of improvement and give feedback during the learning process. That feedback can be given by the teacher. It can also happen between the students in peer assessment, or the same students can reflect on their own learning. See? And of course, there are different ways of doing it, with questions, observation,
Buen
quick
día.
checks. But the focus of this assessment is to identify gaps in learning before moving forward, as assessment is a tool for improvement. Whereas the assessment for learning seeks to measure achievement, how much they have learned. And it happens at the end of the course, at the end of the term. To do that, we can use exams. There are projects, for example, here in the school, our teachers in subjects like global perspectives and IT, students don't take tests. They prepare projects. So during the term, they work on tasks related to the final project. So the formative assessment happens over those tasks. And then at the end, they present their final projects. So we give our students grades, we certify achievement, like in the case of Cambridge exams that you mentioned. And of course, here assessment happens as a judgment of learning. They learn how much they learn. What are we going to do about it? Will the student get the certificate or not? Will the student pass the course or not? It is also very important to know that in CLIL, assessment is closely related to the can-do statements. As English teachers, you are familiarized with the can-do statements, which provide criteria to help us and help the students focus on the learning outcomes. So the same can-do statements that we use for English, or the concept of a can-do statement, is applied to different subjects. So as I mentioned before, these are often used to describe communicative and cognitive skills.
Está al lado del
For
escritorio.
example, if you look here, in this example, you can see the verbs using the can-do statements. They can describe that is a cognitive skill, classify, they can measure. See, that is the alignment between the can-do statement and the cognitive skills that we want to develop in our students. So here in Google Classroom, you will find, let me see, can-do statements. Just a second. In Google Classroom, you will find this activity. We don't have much time to do it. I'm gonna leave it open. There are different subjects and different can-do statements. And the second page, the learning outcomes. So what you need to do is to identify or to match the learning outcomes to the can-do statement, to know how it aligns, to have an idea. And then you can think, okay, how can I apply can-do statements for my students' assessment? Because that's important. When I start a unit or I start a lesson, in my lesson plan, I include the success criteria. The success criteria is not other thing that the can-do statement written in first person, because the students are the ones who decide if they achieved or if they can do what you are saying they will do. I don't, have you seen in the English course books, the more modern books, at the end of the unit, there is a box that says, I can use verbs in past, I can write short stories. And the students put,
Yes, yes, they include it at the end by
exactly,
themselves, the self-assessment.
that self-assessment based on the success criteria. And the success criteria is aligned to they can do assessment and the cognitive skills or communicative skills that you want to develop with your students. So as you mentioned, Angela, when it comes to self-assessment, the students will say, I can do this. I can explain how I made a database. It's how the students see themselves. And this is a very important exercise because it helps the student develop their reflection skills. And I am completely sure that now you will remember that the student who comments at the end of an exercise. That was easy. It was really easy. And later on, when you evaluate them, they fail. It's because those students have still an excess of confidence and they haven't developed this ability to really reflect on their real knowledge, on their weaker areas. They still, and it happens, students who try to hide the fact that they have weaknesses and they say everything was correct when they made mistakes. See, so it's a way how they perceive themselves, but it is important that the students do this reflection exercise. But at the same time, the can-do statements can help with peer assessment. And like my partner can do this thing, which is also important because it is how we can help our students with their critical thinking, how we can provide feedback assertively to a classmate or to someone else. Because that also happens in the classroom. Some students who are really judgmental, really strict, they tend to be stricter than the teacher, right? So no, everything is wrong. But if you really look at it, there are some positive areas in what your classmate did. So little by little, we teach them to observe, to be more critical, to be more assertive when providing feedback. So even when you teach your students to, assess each other, it is really useful to give them sentence starters where the students can complete the feedback to be given to their classmates. What questions or comments do you have about this part, guys? Patricia, do you conduct peer or self-assessment in your lessons? Or how often? How do you do it? Please tell us.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I train my students for Cambridge exams,
Mm-hmm.
and when I have a speaking section,
Mm-hmm.
use one of my best students because he or she has a good level of English in terms of grammar, pronunciation, fluency, intonation, and so on. So my student and me, well, we assess in a positive way my students. In that case, we listen carefully, we take notes about what they are saying, good things, bad things, and then when they are done, well, we provide the positive and negatives things that they have said or how they have to improve. And my students, they accept the opinion of my student as well, because I would say that they consider that he or she has a good level of English, and it is not because my student is judging them, but my student is supporting the others. So it's quite useful peer assessment as well.
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
how I use peer
absolutely.
assessment. Mhm.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, it also raises their confidence because it is not my teacher. Sometimes the students might feel like the teacher is telling me that I am good because she's my teacher, because he's my teacher. He has to be nice. But
Mhm.
when it is a classmate, the one who comments positively, that's reassuring. The students feel much more confident. So encouraging peer assessment in the classroom helps, but of course it has to be guided at the beginning through rubrics, as you guys mentioned, a checklist that the students can use as reference, because there are moments when the students have very close friendships. So, oh, you did great, everything is perfect, because they are friends. Or when they do not have strong relationships, they criticize strongly. But when you set the guide, okay, this is the rubric, this is what we need to check, this is the passage with the sentence frames, how you should provide feedback, you are giving it a structure. And little by little, again, you remove that scaffolding as they grow and become more critical uh, in order to provide feedback. But it is really useful. Okay, so next week you will be doing your test. I just wanted to uh, share with you some information. As I mentioned before, I do not have any response from Books and Bits yet, but I suppose that over the week they will communicate with you, or they will get back to me to let me know. So the WhatsApp group will be open until next week when you do your test. But on that day, you will have the question paper and the answer sheet. The answer sheet looks like this. Generally, your name is already written in the answer sheet. If not, you will have to do it in capital letters and using a pencil. Your signature must be there. The center number is a code. In the case of Ecuador, EC, and there is a number depending on the center. Books and Bits, they have their own code. So it will be sent to you by email, or the day of the exam, it will be written in your candidate sheet information, your confirmation of entry. So you need to look at center number, and that's the number you need to write there. You will also receive your candidate number, and that is the correct way of writing your candidate's number in each box, and then you color the corresponding number in each column. Once you do that, you will see your answer sheet. There are 80 questions. In this example, I only show 68, but there are 80 questions. You need to use an HB pencil. Take an eraser with you because you can erase your answers there. Just be careful when you mark your answers, so you don't make so many mistakes. It might be it happens when people are nervous, but you won't be nervous. You have been preparing for that exam, and you are ready. So just make sure to complete the information correctly, to fill up the form, And some additional recommendations, guys, before the exam. During this week, try to check your email to see if you received exam information. Stay in touch through the WhatsApp group so that we can help each other and you know if that information has arrived. Check your spam box. It might be there as well. If you are not in Quito, because the exam will definitely be there, plan your trip ahead so that you can get permissions. Sometimes some people work over the weekend, so you may need permissions or to stay somewhere near the location, etc. Try to allot some time for regular revision of what we have done here, check your notes, watch the recorded sessions. As I mentioned, the last session, you will have access to Google Classroom until next week when you do your exam. In Google Classroom, you know there is a chatbot that you can use as an examiner. You can ask the chatbot to prepare some questions and give you some questions and self-assess your knowledge of different areas. Believe it or not, doing exercise and staying hydrated is really important. It gives you energy, keeps you fresh. We are all teachers and we give these suggestions to our students, so we understand the importance of staying energized and doing exercise. Walking for 30 minutes will help me, handle that examination situation that's gonna be uh, probably new for some of you, or the last time I did an exam was a long time ago. So going through this stage is quite exhausting. HB pencil, yes, Maria Elisa. Prepare your materials the day before. It also happens if you want to prepare them the moment that you are leaving, you notice that you forgot your pencil, that you forgot the sharpener, that the eraser is not there. So try to keep everything ready the day before. Sleep well. Don't burn the midnight candle or trying to study the night before. And during the exam day, my suggestion is that you arrive at least 30 minutes before. That will give you time to find your examination room, to make sure that you are in the right room. Once you are in the room and start your exam, as I show you here, try to fill out all your exam information at the beginning, um, your name, your signature. It tends to happen that since we are excited about the process, we start doing the exam immediately and we forget to sign, to complete all this information that's relevant. Go over all the exam first. So check the question paper. Okay, what questions do I have? What areas seem to be easier? That takes 2 minutes, 3 minutes, no more. But it is for you to identify where you will find more, which section will probably be more difficult and which areas will be easier. If you find questions that are difficult, do not get stuck in there thinking about your answer. Just move forward. Finish all the exam first, all the questions you know, and then get back to those. Don't spend too much time in those difficult questions. At the end, just guess. Make an educated guess based on what you have studied, but do not leave unanswered questions. Okay, that's really important. Transfer your answers carefully to the answer sheet. Stay calm. Oh, there's a spelling mistake there. Stay calm. You are ready for this. I wish you the best of luck, the best of success, not luck, success in the exam. I know you will do a great job. It's been a pleasure for me to work with you guys. There is a final task in Google Classroom for types of assessment. So you can do that one as well to practice. And as I said before, for me, it would be really nice to stay in touch with you. That's the QR to my Instagram account. I will be posting a photo of the end of the course. So I would really appreciate if you could just drop a comment, a message. And again, I wish you the best. It's been a really great and a pleasure for me to work with all of you, to see you committed through the entire course. I know that it's hard to wake up early on a Saturday, on a Sunday, especially after a long and exhausting week teaching. Um, so that really deserves an applause to you guys. Once again, thanks a lot. This final session was being broadcasted on YouTube. Once the broadcast is complete, I will share the link with you. So thank you again. And I would like to hear if you have any other questions. If not, we can close the session and enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Fabian, thank you so much for your patience, for your knowledge, and for sharing as well your experiences with your current students there. This course was really meaningful for me, and I hope to pass the exam with a high band actually. I will let you know.
You will do it with flying colors. I'm really sure of that. And thank you very much for your words, Patricia.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
So
Thanks, Fabian, for everything, and my best wishes for all our classmates. We hope to get a great score. Hugs for you, and
you
I see
will.
you there in Quito.
See you soon. See you soon. Yeah, hopefully I will be there in July. I still don't know if I will stay in Quito or if I will be back here, for another school year. They want me back here, but to be honest, I really miss my family, my country after 3 years. I know that being there, one can feel, that, oh my God, everything is so bad in my country right now. But once you are not there, you really miss it. And you know how much, uh, how important and how beautiful some minor things are. Going outside for an encebollado does not have comparison. I really miss that. So those are just little things that make my country beautiful and make me miss my people, my country. So hopefully I will be there in May, and why not try to have some time to meet. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you so
Fabian,
much. Take
thank you
care.
very
Bye.
much
I
for
appreciate it.
everything. I really learned. These
You're welcome.
courses make me feel that I can do it.
Yes,
I have a
absolutely.
huge change, and I think these courses make the difference.
Thank you very much, Carolina. I wish you the best. And again,